So now we've got those connections kind of configured with the ability to configure these per environment. I now want to go through how you can actually create these on the fly in a feature. So if we look back to the InfoPath tutorial on the SharePoint Dev Wiki, you can see that what we did last time in parts 1, 2 and 3 was generate this feature here. But now what we want to do is you actually want to go through and we want to generate the dependencies that go with that. So I'm actually going to see if I can get away with this in 2010. So you can see here that we've got our source InfoPath form and we've got our feature, so it's very much the same as how this is set out here. But what we want to do now is we actually want to create another feature within this solution package. So the way that we do that is just come into and add a new item, and we're using WSP Builder for this again. And so we've just clicked on WSP Builder and we want a blank feature, and we'll call this very similar to what we've already got, so agenda InfoPath form feature, but what we're going to do is, rather than call it exactly the same, I'm going to call it dependencies feature. And we've got to make sure that we add an event handler to this one, because what we want to do is actually fire off some programmatic code when that gets created. And we want to create this, I guess we can do this at a web level, because all of this is going to be in one site, which is a web in the API. So what that's gone away and done now is added a few extra DLLs to the SharePoint DLL, and it's created a new feature folder here with your feature and an elements. And you'll see here that it's already automatically for us done a lot of the plumbing work around when this feature gets activated. It's going to run this class for me, and that class file has already been created for me down here. With features you can essentially do various things on activation. So when I go in to my SharePoint site here, and you'll see we did this before. So if I go to site features, you'll see that I can activate and deactivate certain things, switch them on and off. This method here implements the SP feature receiver, which actually says that when I activate a feature, run any of the code I do in here. Or when I deactivate a feature, run any of the code we do in here. Or when the feature is installed in the farm, do something, and when it's uninstalled in the farm. So there's quite a few events you can hook into. The ones we're interested in really are when someone goes in here and pushes that magic button and switches it on. What it actually does is it will go through and it will follow, it'll trigger this off and run these methods, and then it will actually follow through the declarative definition of the feature. So it will stumble in here and it will go, okay, well there's an element manifest in here. And inside this element manifest, which we'll jump to, at the minute there's nothing. But what we can actually do is say, well, we want to actually declaratively create some lists. So those lists that I kind of ran through in terms of solution generator, we'll just go through that again. Unless I have got SP source. I have got SP source installed. Let's do it that way. Okay, so we've got SP source installed on this machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the location of SP source. So I think on this machine it's here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this easier for us to fire off SP source. So in the external tools, I'm just going to go add. I'm just going to say this command is going to be that, and we're going to run SP source, and the initial directory is the project directory that we select. Now you want it to output that window, so click OK on that. Oh, and the only argument you need is, well, what site do you want it to look at to reverse engineer? So you'll see here that if I just grab that site here, because that's where all these lists are that we want to reverse engineer. So I just come in here and I add that. So that's the reference you give SP source to say this is the site we're going to reverse engineer. So I click OK there. And now all we do is we just set up some files to tell it what we want to reverse engineer. So I'm just going to copy that elements file because it uses the same schema. Now SP source, the application, looks for files ending in .sp source. So I'm just going to call this list.sp source. And what we can do here is I'm just going to, this is the syntax, which is very similar to what it eventually outputs in the end as well. So we just want to grab the data connection library. We want to grab the configuration list, spell it right. We want to grab the test form library. And we want to grab the projects library as well. So all we do to actually run this now is that we make sure we've got this project selected. So if you have multiple projects in here, you may have to make sure you've got that one selected. And we just come up to tools and we select the SP source. And we get an error. Awesome. D is not an acceptable argument. Thanks very much. So I'll just go back into here, and I've obviously got my my arguments wrong. So I'm just going to run this up in the command line. Okay. Design sites looking for. And what you'll see there is that that's run that very quickly, and it's found that SP source file that I gave it, and it's spun through and it's completed that. And that seemed to go very quickly, as if it didn't find anything. Now I think what I've done wrong here is I actually need to call on that, not list. There you go. So this time it's found them. So you can see there that it's actually gone through and it's done the reverse engineering of those things. If I go yes to all now, if I just minimise that, if I go show all files, it's actually gone and created all the files I require in my project for me automatically. So if I come in here now and go include, that's going to add those to my projects. And the only other one I need to include is this manifest file. Now the manifest file, what it does is it declares that there's something called a list template, and it's done all the settings for me, and it's pulled out the data connection names library and the configuration test form library, and it's given them individual GUIDs and picked the correct template types for me. And the other thing it's done is, if I check in my feature receiver now, you'll notice that it's actually updated my feature XML, and it's added element files for each of those files that's in here, because if you don't get those, when you run the package builder, it will just ignore them. And it's hooked up this element manifest, which is this one. So the feature now goes to look through here, and it goes, right, well, I'm going to have to create a list template in this site, and then I'm going to create a list instance in that site as well. So that in effect, if I deploy this now, will create all of those lists for me on the fly. The only thing it's not done in this current build of SP source is it won't create the items in here or inside here which we require. So if we look back at here, we'll see that there are a few other things we need to do to get those UDCX files in there. And the way we do that is we just get 2 stub files. So we create an XML file. And we call this what do this one say it's called? Main submit.udcx. It's got all the it's got all the numbers in it. It's because the cut and paste in IE doesn't work. There you go, I don't want the line numbers in anymore. And then the other one was called a SharePoint list connection. So in our list form we've got 2 types of UDCX files. One's a list connection, and one is a submit type UDCX file. So I'm just going to save this one as well. And what you'll see is that this is very, very similar to the one that is actually already in that SharePoint site. So if I go in to here in my data connection library, if I actually saved that main, or had a look at that one, come in here, you'll see that in this main submit.udcx, which is actually published, you'll see that in this one the folder name is going to that library there. In my main submit in this one, the folder name is actually empty. So this is like a stubbed empty one. So what we do is we upload this file, but then we dynamically put in the correct values, because you'll see that it's hard coded there to that environment, and you can't do relative URLs within a UDCX file. So we do need to, on the fly, adjust these to whatever environment it's been activated in. So now we have those 2 files in there. One thing we have to remember to do is, because we've added them into this feature, we need to make sure the feature XML has knowledge that they exist. So I'm just going to make sure that they're included in the feature manifest, because otherwise when it's packaged up they won't be there for the feature to be able to use. So there's like a manifest, very similar to like a cab file manifest when you do a make cab. So now those files are in there, we need to do something with them to get them into that list. So the way that we do that is we do that programmatically. So in here what we're going to do now is we're going to upload the SharePoint connection UDCX for the configuration list. And what other data connections have we got? That's the only one we've got in this form, because the main submit is actually not using a UDCX, it's just configured up in the form, so there's no conversion there at all, whereas this one is actually a proper UDCX, what it's looking for. So we only have to actually do one. So if I come back in here now and have a look at this code, you'll see what I've got here is this ability to do a create list item. So in my code I'm going to call that method, paste it in the right place. And I've got those methods there to grab, but I'm not going to be able to grab it there because I'm in IE, so I'm just going to go view markup and grab it from the source. So now these kind of things you can actually put into a generic library and don't have to include these methods in each one, but just for this demo we'll put it here. And you should see now that what I'm actually doing, if I hopefully that will build. No, I'm missing my SharePoint namespace. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm just going to delete that and re-add it. It's still a bit buggy, this 210, but where'd it go? Okay, that's interesting, it's not actually coming up in here. So I'm just going to see whether it's in here by its path. So we want common files. Wow. Okay, so I need to go and get it from its location. See if that goes away if I get rid of the other resolution errors. Awesome. Let's make sure I'm building this to the correct version. Okay, so we've got that working now. I think it's because I just didn't have a Visual Studio targeted the build at the right version level. So what we need to do now is effectively have the web grabbed from something. So the way we get the web is off the properties in that feature. We can do it like that, which gives this function its context. And then you'll see now that I have the ability to, if I want to go and create a data connection library, so that's the list name, and the root directory should already be dynamic, and okay, I had that wrong. In this instance, what it's actually doing is it's setting up, this one's setting up a connection to a SharePoint list called projects, and it's going to create a UDCX file inside the data connection library. So you'll see here that what that one's actually doing is it's creating this UDCX file. What we want to do is we want to create this configuration one, which is slightly different. So what we need to do is we want to create a list item in the configuration, a UDCX file for the list called configuration, and store it in that default library. So that will now do that. And we don't need to worry about creating a main, submit, or the projects for now, because the form that we have isn't doing that. But if you scroll down here, all the information is here in terms of what it's actually doing. So what it's actually doing is grabbing. Let's just show you how it's doing it. So this one is going to create a data connection library list item. And what it does is it grabs the SharePoint connection template, which is that one there. So I'm just going to make sure I've got that name exactly right. .udcx. And all it's going to do is it's going to squirt in the relevant information. So you'll see here that it's going to, where the list ID is in the XML, so that's using XPath to get to that value, it's going to put in the correct values. So you'll see here that I'm actually going to put in the list ID. So in our current example, when you look at it, the list ID is hard coded, so we'd have to go and build that. But what this is doing programmatically is actually adding that UDCX value for you and creating that. It's also going to put in the correct web URL in the UDCX file there. And another necessary thing is it's going to put in this description node as per up the top here, which is really just a history thing to say who generated it. So once that's done, that's going to create your bits and pieces there. But if you then wanted to go through and, for instance, automatically create your values and your configuration here, what we can actually do is use, well, there's two approaches. We can either programmatically do it, in the event handlers. So we can programmatically do it in here. So we could actually, on creation, create the environment variables. But the issue there is that then you're baking the environment variables in. So I would say create list item, and we call it configuration. Oh, sorry, what do we call it? Asset tracking email, and we'd put in here test dot whatever. But the problem is that, well, okay, it's not going to be in a hard coded in the InfoPath form now, but we're now hard coding this inside our feature activation. So the best thing to really do there is to actually do that as a manual process, because every environment is going to be slightly different, and just do that after the fact. But you can write some quick PowerShell scripts that you can have for each environment to spin that up, because there's no real intelligent way for each of the features to understand what values that would be. You could do a switch statement, so you could come in here and say if environment equals test, then do something in here, and you could have XML files for each environment sitting here, which you could version off. But to be honest, it's probably easier to just do that as a manual step, unless there was lots and lots of configs you were setting up. So with all that created there, all you simply do now is come into your WSP builder, and that's going to go away, create that WISP, and you'll see it's pulling up all those resources it requires, which has understanding and logic of what's in that list. And then once that's done, if we go and have a look in here, we'll see that WISP is there. Hopefully it's finished. Yep, it's done. So if I copy that WISP and have a look in there, You'll see all those files are in that CAV file with all the necessary requirements, and that you could then give that to an administrator as a WSP file with the execution script, and that would deploy the InfoPath form as a feature which you can then activate at your site level, and it'd also then go and deploy all of the lists that were required with the associated content type and all of the UDCX files that are required for that form in here as well.